Grandma, look what I found. There's a secret hiding place. My 8-year-old grandson Tommy held up a small metal box from under his father's bed, his face beaming with excitement. What I found inside that box made my hands shake and my blood run cold. That's when I realized the truth about my own son, about what he'd been doing, about what he'd been planning all along. This is the story of how my innocent grandson accidentally saved both our lives by being good at hide and seek, and how I learned that sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is someone you trust completely. You won't believe how this ends. But before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to Never Too Old channel. We're creating a community of incredible people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now, back to the story. Ready or not, here I come. I called out from the kitchen, wiping my hands on my apron. Tuesday afternoons were always the same. Tommy would get restless after his snack, and I'd suggest hide and seek to burn off some energy before dinner. At 72, chasing an 8-year-old around wasn't exactly easy on these old bones, but hearing his giggles echo through the house made every creaky step worth it. I started my search in the usual spots. Behind the living room curtains, empty. Under the dining room table, just dust bunnies. The hall closet where he always tried to squeeze behind my winter coats, nothing. Tommy Miller, you're getting too good at this game, I called out, genuinely puzzled. 5 years of playing this same routine, and I thought I knew every hiding spot in this old house. Then I heard it, a soft thump from upstairs, followed by what sounded like wood scraping against wood. Brian's room. My son had been staying there more often lately, claiming his apartment lease was up and he needed time to figure things out. Just another one of his stories, I'd assumed. I climbed the stairs slowly, gripping the banister. Each step creaked under my weight, a symphony I'd grown accustomed to after 40 years in this house. Tommy, are you up here, sweetheart? Silence. I pushed open the door to Brian's room. The twin bed sat against the far wall, still covered with the same blue plaid comforter from his high school days. His old dresser stood in the corner, topped with baseball trophies that gathered dust. But no Tommy. Grandma Grace. His voice came from under the bed? I bent down, my knees protesting, and peered underneath. There was Tommy lying on his stomach, completely hidden except for his sneakers poking out. Oh my goodness, how did you fit under there? I laughed. But Tommy wasn't laughing. He was holding something in his small hands, his face scrunched up in concentration. Grandma, look what I found. He wiggled backward, emerging with cobwebs in his dark hair. There's a secret hiding place. In his hands was a small metal box, like the kind used for storing important papers. The lid was slightly ajar, and I could see documents inside. What do you have there, honey? I asked, though something cold was already settling in my stomach. I was hiding way back under the bed, and I felt this loose board. When I pushed on it, it moved, and this was underneath. Tommy held up the box like a prize. Do you think Daddy was playing pirates? Like buried treasure? I took the box from his small hands, my fingers trembling slightly. On top were several official-looking documents with my name printed across the top in bold letters. Life insurance policies. 3 different ones, all listing me as the insured, all naming Brian as the beneficiary. 150,000, 200,000, another one 50, $500,000 total. My breath caught in my throat. All policies I'd never seen before, never signed, never even knew existed. The signatures at the bottom of each application looked like my handwriting, but something was off. The loops in the G were too wide. The M in Miller slanted wrong. Someone had practiced copying my signature, but they hadn't quite gotten it right. When I lifted out the insurance papers, more documents appeared underneath. Adoption agency forms, partially filled out with Tommy's information. My hands shook as I read through them. Brian was planning to give Tommy up for adoption. But at the very bottom of the box, tucked beneath everything else, were 3 small pill bottles. No labels, no markings, just unmarked bottles filled with white pills that looked familiar. They resembled my daily medications, my calcium supplements, my blood pressure pills, my vitamins. "Tommy, honey, when was the last time you saw Daddy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "A few days ago. He said you were sleeping, so we had to be really quiet." Tommy's face brightened with the memory. "We played a secret game." "A secret game?" "Yeah. He said it was a surprise for you, so I couldn't tell. He went to the kitchen and did something, and I had to be the lookout." Tommy looked worried now. "Did I mess up the surprise?" I stared at those unmarked bottles. Brian had been visiting while I slept, going to my kitchen where I kept my medications. For the past 6 months, I'd been getting weaker, more confused, constantly nauseous. I'd blamed it on getting older, but now, what kind of surprise, sweetheart? "I don't know. He just said grown-up stuff in the kitchen. He told me to stay in the living room and watch for cars." Tommy shrugged. "It was kinda boring." My nursing instincts kicked in. These pills in the unmarked bottles. I needed to know what they were before I could be sure of what Brian was doing. But the combination of evidence was chilling: insurance policies I'd never signed, adoption papers for Tommy, and mysterious pills that looked like my medications. I looked at this beautiful child, this innocent boy who had no idea what he'd just discovered, who had no idea that he might have just saved both our lives. "Tommy, you did something very important today. You're my little hero, do you know that?" Tommy beamed at me, not understanding the weight of what he'd found, just happy to make his grandma smile. But as I held him close, my mind was already forming a plan. I needed to test these pills, find out exactly what was in them, and if they contained what I suspected they did, I'd know what to do next. That night, after Tommy had gone to bed, I sat at my kitchen table staring at those 3 unmarked bottles. The house felt different now. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every creak in the old walls made me jump. For 40 years, this had been my safe haven. Now I wondered how many times my own son had crept through these rooms while I slept. I picked up the first bottle and shook it gently. The pills rattled around, sounding exactly like my calcium tablets. Same size, same shape, same chalky white color. If I hadn't found Brian's secret stash, I never would have suspected anything. My old nursing textbooks were still packed away in the basement, but I didn't need them to know what to do first. I grabbed my pill organizer from the counter, the one I'd filled just 3 days ago, following my usual Sunday night routine. 7 little compartments, one for each day of the week, each containing my morning medications. I dumped Tuesday's pills into my palm. 3 tablets, calcium, blood pressure medication, and vitamin D. They looked identical to what was in Brian's bottles, but appearances could be deceiving. Back in my nursing days, we'd had a saying, "When in doubt, test it out." The smart thing would be to take these to the hospital lab, but that would mean explanations, questions, official reports. I wasn't ready for that yet, not until I was absolutely certain. But there was another way. I opened my laptop, one I'd bought myself last year after getting tired of having to ask Tommy for help with technology all the time. At 8 years old, he was already better with computers than I'd ever be. It took me several tries to remember my password, but finally the screen lit up. "Home drug testing kits," I typed into the search bar. Dozens of results appeared. Testing kits for everything imaginable, available for next-day delivery. I found what I was looking for: a comprehensive drug identification kit that could detect common poisons and toxins, not hospital grade, but good enough to tell me if these pills contained something they shouldn't. The kit would arrive Thursday morning. I stared at my pill organizer sitting on the counter. Tomorrow's medications were already portioned out, waiting for me to take them with breakfast like I had every morning for months. Not anymore. Whatever was in those pills could stay right where it was. I heard footsteps on the stairs. "Grandma? Are you still up?" Tommy appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair sticking up in all directions, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "I couldn't sleep," I said, quickly closing the laptop. "Just checking my email. I had a bad dream." He rubbed his eyes. About pirates taking treasure away from people. My heart ached. Even in his sleep, Tommy was processing what we'd found today. "Come here, sweetheart." He climbed onto my lap, still small enough to fit comfortably there. I smoothed down his unruly hair and breathed in that familiar scent of children's shampoo and sleepy warmth. "Do you want to tell me about the dream?" There was this mean pirate who was stealing things from a grandma and a little boy. But the little boy found where the pirate hid all the stolen stuff. Tommy yawned. "The grandma was really smart and she caught the bad pirate." "That sounds like a brave little boy." "Yeah. He saved the grandma because he was good at hiding games." Tommy's eyes were already drooping. "The grandma made everything okay again." I carried him back upstairs and tucked him into his bed. He was asleep before I even reached the door. "The grandma made everything okay again." Standing in Tommy's doorway, watching his peaceful face in the dim light from the hallway, I made myself a promise. Whatever those pills contained, whatever Brian was planning, I would make this okay. Tommy deserved to grow up safe and loved, not shuffled off to strangers because his father valued money more than family. I went back downstairs and opened my laptop again. This time, I wasn't just ordering a drug testing kit, I was researching lawyers who specialized in elder abuse, insurance fraud investigators, child custody attorneys. If Brian thought he could systematically destroy his family for profit, he was about to discover just how wrong he was. I worked until 3 in the morning, taking careful notes, making lists, preparing for war. Because that's what this was, a war for Tommy's future and my own survival. Thursday morning arrived with a soft knock on the door. I'd been awake since 5, pacing the kitchen, checking the window every few minutes. The delivery truck pulled away just as I signed for the small package. Tommy was still asleep upstairs. Perfect. I spread the contents of the testing kit across my kitchen table like I was preparing for surgery. Chemical reagents, test strips, instruction booklet, and small vials for samples. It had been years since I'd done any lab work, but the process came back quickly. I started with the pills from my regular bottle, my actual calcium supplements that I kept in the medicine cabinet. The test strip turned the expected pale yellow, normal calcium carbonate, just like it should be. Then I tested one of the white pills from Brian's unmarked bottle. The strip turned deep purple. I stared at the color chart in the instruction manual, my hands shaking. Purple indicated the presence of digitalis, a heart medication that could be deadly in the wrong doses. In small amounts over time, it would cause exactly the symptoms I'd been experiencing: weakness, nausea, confusion. In larger doses, it would stop my heart completely. My son had been slowly poisoning me with heart medication. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair, the truth settling over me like ice water. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was attempted murder, carefully planned and methodically executed over months. The sound of small feet on the stairs snapped me back to the present. I quickly swept the testing materials into the box, but kept one purple test strip as evidence. "Morning, Grandma Grace." Tommy bounded into the kitchen, his hair sticking up in every direction. "Can we have pancakes?" "Of course, sweetheart." My voice sounded surprisingly normal. "Go wash your hands first." While Tommy was in the bathroom, I hid the testing kit in the back of my closet, behind my winter coats, but I kept that purple test strip in my purse, along with the photos I'd taken of the insurance documents and adoption papers. Over breakfast, Tommy chattered about his upcoming school project on dinosaurs while I watched him eat, memorizing every detail. His gap-toothed smile when he laughed at his own jokes, the way he carefully cut his pancakes into perfect squares, the dinosaur facts he'd been collecting like treasures. This beautiful boy deserved so much better than what Brian had planned for him. "Grandma, you're not eating," Tommy observed, syrup dripping from his fork. I looked down at my untouched plate, just thinking about grown-up stuff, honey. Boring grown-up stuff? Something like that. After Tommy left for school, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Detective Karen Brooks at the local police station. We'd met years ago when I'd treated her daughter in the emergency room. The second was to James Wilson, an attorney who specialized in elder abuse cases. The third was to my old nursing colleague, Linda Parker, who now worked in the hospital's toxicology lab. Each conversation was careful, professional. I laid out the facts without emotion: forged insurance documents, adoption papers filed without permission, and pills that tested positive for a dangerous heart medication. I had evidence, I had documentation, and I had a plan. By noon, I had appointments scheduled for tomorrow. Detective Brooks would come to the house to collect the evidence. James Wilson would begin filing for emergency custody of Tommy. Linda would run professional lab tests on the remaining pills to confirm my home testing results. But first, I needed to set a trap. I called Brian from my landline, knowing he'd recognize the number. "Mom?" His voice sounded surprised. "Is everything okay? You never call during the day?" "I'm not feeling well, honey. Could you come by tonight? I think I need to go to the doctor, but I don't want to worry Tommy." There was a pause. "What's wrong?" "Just dizzy spells, shortness of breath. Probably nothing serious, but at my age, I let my voice trail off, adding a slight tremor that wasn't entirely fake. "I'll be there by 8. Don't do anything until I get there, okay?" "Thank you, Brian. You're such a good son." The words tasted bitter in my mouth, but they had the desired effect. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice when he hung up. At exactly 8 o'clock, I heard Brian's key in the front door. I was sitting in my recliner in the living room, a blanket draped over my legs, doing my best impression of a frail old woman approaching death's door. "Mom?" Brian called out, his voice carrying that fake concern I'd grown to recognize over the years. "In here, honey," I replied, adding a slight wheeze to my voice. He appeared in the doorway, and for a moment I saw him as he really was. Not my son, but a stranger who'd been systematically poisoning me for months. Tall and lean like his father, but where Tom had been gentle, Brian carried himself with an edge of constant irritation. "You look terrible," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "What's been going on?" "Just feeling so weak lately. Can't seem to catch my breath." I clutched the blanket tighter around me. "And the strangest thing, I keep forgetting to take my medications. Found 3 days' worth still sitting in my pill organizer this morning." I watched his face carefully. There it was, a tiny flicker of something. Concern? No. Calculation. "You have to stay on top of your medications, Mom. At your age, missing doses can be dangerous." I know. I just get so confused sometimes." I leaned forward slightly. "Brian, I need to ask you something. Have you been taking out life insurance policies on me?" The change in his expression was instant. The fake concern vanished, replaced by wariness. "What are you talking about?" "I found some papers. 3 different policies, all with my name on them. All with your name as the beneficiary." Brian was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, colder. "Where did you find those?" "Does it matter? The question is why you forged my signature on insurance applications." "I didn't forge anything." But he was shifting in his chair now, no longer relaxed. "Those are legitimate policies. I took them out to protect our family's future." "Our family?" I let the blanket slip from my shoulders and sat up straighter. "The same family you were planning to abandon?" "I found the adoption papers too, Brian. All filled out and ready to go." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand the situation." "Then explain it to me." I kept my voice calm, though my heart was racing. "Explain how poisoning your own mother fits into protecting our family's future." "Poisoning?" He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Mom, you're 72 years old. You're not being poisoned. You're dying because that's what old people do." "Digitalis." I said the word quietly, watching his face. "That's what you've been putting in my calcium supplements. Heart medication that causes weakness, confusion, nausea. In the right doses, it mimics the natural decline of old age. In slightly higher doses, it stops the heart completely." Brian went very still. "You always were too smart for your own good," he said finally. The mask was completely off now. This was the son I'd raised, but it was also a stranger, someone capable of calculated murder for money. "Why, Brian? Just tell me why." He stood up and began pacing, running his hands through his hair. You want to know why? Because I'm 45 years old and I have nothing. Nothing, Mom. My wife left me with a kid I never wanted. My business failed. I'm living in my childhood bedroom like some pathetic loser. So you decided to kill me. I decided to solve our problems. He spun around to face me. You're old. You've lived your life. Tommy would be better off with a real family, people who actually want kids, and I could finally start over somewhere else. With $500,000 in insurance money. Why not? You raised me, fed me, put me through school. Consider it back payment with interest. I stared at this man who shared my DNA but had somehow become a complete stranger. I also raised you to have a conscience. Conscience doesn't pay the bills, Mom. Neither does murder, Brian. Because you're not getting away with this. Something in my tone made him pause. What do you mean? I mean, I tested those pills. I have proof of what you've been doing, and I've already contacted the police. The color drained from his face. You're lying. Detective Brooks will be here any minute to collect the evidence. I've also been in touch with an attorney about emergency custody of Tommy. Brian stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. Fight or flight, and I knew which one he'd choose. He'd always been a coward when backed into a corner. You stupid old woman, he said quietly. You have no idea what you've just done. He headed for the front door, moving fast now. Brian, don't make this worse than it already is. But he was already grabbing his jacket from the hall closet. Tell Tommy, his father said goodbye. The front door slammed behind him, and I heard his car engine roar to life in the driveway. I sat alone in my living room, listening to the sound of his tires squealing as he sped away. Somewhere upstairs, Tommy was sleeping peacefully, unaware that his father had just fled into the night rather than face the consequences of trying to murder his own mother. The next 3 days passed in a strange kind of limbo. Detective Brooks had taken my statement, collected all the evidence, and put out an APB on Brian's car, but he'd vanished completely, like he'd simply driven off the edge of the earth. Tommy kept asking where his daddy had gone. He had to go away for work, I told him Friday morning over breakfast. It wasn't exactly a lie. Brian was definitely working hard, at staying one step ahead of the law. When's he coming back? I don't know, sweetheart. Tommy nodded and went back to his cereal, but I could see the wheels turning in his 8-year-old mind. He was starting to piece things together. The way I'd been sick, the way I'd suddenly gotten better, the way his father had disappeared right after our pirate treasure discovery. By Saturday afternoon, the waiting was getting to me. I found myself checking the locks on all the doors twice, peeking through the curtains at every car that drove by. Brian knew where we lived. He knew Tommy's school, his schedule, his route to the bus stop. Detective Brooks called with updates, but they weren't encouraging. Brian's car had been found abandoned in a parking garage downtown. No sign of where he'd gone from there. No credit card activity, no cell phone pings. Either he was very good at staying hidden, or he'd had help. He's probably long gone by now. Detective Brooks said during her Saturday evening check-in. Most fugitives in his situation try to get as far away as possible. But I knew Brian better than that. He wasn't the type to just disappear and start over with nothing. He was lazy, entitled, and used to taking shortcuts. Running away empty-handed wasn't his style. Sunday night, I was proven right. The phone rang at 11:30, just as I was heading to bed. I almost didn't answer. Who calls that late unless it's bad news? But something made me pick up the receiver. Hello, Mom. Brian's voice sent ice water through my veins. He sounded different, rougher, more desperate than I'd ever heard him. Brian. I kept my voice steady. Where are you? Doesn't matter, I'm calling because we need to talk. The police are looking for you. I know that. There was background noise. Traffic, maybe voices. He was calling from somewhere public. That's why we're going to fix this situation. There's nothing to fix. You tried to kill me. I tried to solve a problem, and now you've created a bigger one. His voice was getting harder, more threatening. But it's not too late to make this right. I sat down at my kitchen table, my mind racing. Keep him talking. Find out where he is, what he's planning. What do you want, Brian? I want you to call Detective Brooks tomorrow morning. Tell her you made a mistake. Tell her you were confused, that you misunderstood what you found. And why would I do that? Because if you don't, this gets a lot worse for everyone, especially Tommy. The mention of Tommy's name made my blood freeze. Don't you dare. I know where he goes to school, Mom. I know what time he catches the bus, what route he takes home. I know he plays at Miller Park every Tuesday after school with the Johnson kid from down the street. You stay away from him. That's up to you. Brian's voice was cold now, all pretense of family connection gone. Drop the charges, and I disappear forever. Keep pushing this, and I'll have to come back and clean up this mess myself. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed calm. You're talking about hurting your own son. I'm talking about protecting my future. Tommy's not my problem anymore, remember? You made him your responsibility 5 years ago. And if I don't drop the charges, then I solve this problem the way I should have from the beginning, quickly and permanently. The line went quiet except for the background noise. I could hear him breathing, waiting for my answer. I need time to think, I said finally. You have until noon tomorrow. Call Detective Brooks and tell her you're dropping everything. If you don't, I'll be in touch again soon. Brian, wait. But the line was already dead. I sat in my kitchen holding the silent phone, my heart pounding. He was desperate and dangerous, exactly like Detective Brooks had warned me he might become. But he'd also made a mistake. He'd called from somewhere with background noise, voices, traffic, somewhere public, which meant he was still in town. I called Detective Brooks immediately. He's still here, I told her. He called from somewhere with traffic and voices, public place, probably downtown. What did he want? He wants me to drop the charges, threaten Tommy if I don't. There was a pause. We can put you both in protective custody. No, the idea came to me suddenly, fully formed. He's desperate and making mistakes. Let me call him back. Mrs. Miller, I don't think. He underestimates me. He always has. And right now, that's the only advantage we have. Another pause. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about setting a trap. Detective Brooks was quiet for a long moment. Tell me what you have in mind. By midnight, we had a plan. It was risky, but it was also our best shot at ending this before Brian did something even more desperate. I just had to convince my son that his mother was scared enough to sacrifice justice for safety. Given how well I'd been acting lately, that shouldn't be too hard. The hardest part would be making sure Tommy stayed safe while I played the most dangerous game of my life. Monday morning, I made the call Brian was expecting. But this time, Detective Brooks was listening in, and half the police department was getting ready to close a trap around the man who'd tried to murder his own mother for money. Brian wanted to meet at Miller Park at 2 o'clock, the same park where Tommy played every Tuesday. He wanted me to bring everything, the test strips, the photos of the insurance documents, the adoption papers, all of it. Bring every piece of evidence you think you have, he'd said. We're going to settle this once and for all. Even his choice of location revealed how his mind worked. He couldn't resist the psychological intimidation, the reminder that he knew where to find the boy. And he thought he could intimidate me into handing over everything that could convict him. At exactly 2 o'clock Monday afternoon, I walked into Miller Park carrying a manila envelope filled with copies of evidence Brian would never get his hands on. The real evidence was locked safely in Detective Brooks's office, but Brian didn't need to know that. The park was busier than usual for a Monday. Joggers on the path, a mother pushing a stroller, an old man feeding pigeons by the pond. All undercover officers, though you'd never know it from looking at them. The tiny microphone taped under my sweater felt cold against my skin. I found Brian sitting on our agreed-upon bench near the playground. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes he'd fled in 3 days ago, but his eyes were sharp and alert as I approached. You came alone, he said. It wasn't a question. You said to come alone. I sat down on the opposite end of the bench, leaving space between us. I brought what you asked for. His eyes fixed on the envelope. All of it? Everything. The test results, photos of the insurance papers, the adoption forms, it's all here.
Hand it over.
First, I want to know why you called off your plan. You could have just disappeared. Why contact me? Brian laughed, but there was no humor in it. Because you didn't just ruin my plan, Mom. You ruined my life. My face is probably on every police computer in the state by now. I can't get a job, can't rent an apartment, can't even buy food without cash. So you decided to threaten your own child. I decided to fix the mess you created. He held out his hand. The envelope. I didn't move. What happens after I give this to you? You just disappear and leave Tommy alone? Tommy's not my concern anymore. He never really was. He's 8 years old, Brian. He's your son. He's a mistake I've been paying for since the day he was born. Brian's voice was getting louder, more agitated. His mother didn't want him, I didn't want him, but somehow I got stuck with him anyway. Until you came along and decided to play martyr grandmother. I came along because someone had to take care of him. Well, now you can keep doing that forever, because after today, I'm done with this family. I looked at this stranger wearing my son's face. What happened to you, Brian? You weren't always like this. I grew up. He stood up from the bench. I realized that being a good person doesn't pay the bills. Being nice doesn't get you ahead. And family, he gestured between us, family is just people who hold you back. Is that why you tried to kill me? Because I was holding you back? I tried to solve a problem efficiently. If you just died quietly like you were supposed to, everyone would have been better off. You'd be out of your misery, Tommy would have a real family, and I could finally start over. The casual way he talked about my death made my blood chill, but I kept my voice steady. And now you're going to give me that envelope, and I'm going to disappear. You'll never see me again, and Tommy will grow up thinking his father was just some guy who left. Which is basically the truth anyway. I stood up and walked closer to him, envelope in hand. You know what I realized, Brian? You're right about one thing. You never were a real father to Tommy. Finally, something we agree on. But you're wrong about everything else. I held the envelope just out of his reach. Tommy isn't better off without you because you abandoned him. He's better off without you because of who you chose to become. Brian lunged for the envelope, but I pulled it back. You want this. You're going to have to take it. That's when his composure finally cracked completely. You stupid old woman. He grabbed my wrist, trying to wrestle the envelope away from me. You have no idea what you've cost me. I know exactly what I've cost you, I said, not fighting back as he yanked the envelope from my hands. I cost you the chance to murder your own mother and abandon your child, and I'm glad I did. Brian ripped open the envelope and pulled out the papers inside. His face went from triumphant to confused to furious in the span of seconds. These are blank, he said. The real evidence is with the police. Has been from the beginning. You, hands up, police! Detective Brooks and 3 other officers emerged from their hiding spots, weapons drawn. Brian spun around, wild-eyed, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Brian Miller, you're under arrest for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and making terroristic threats. For a moment, I thought he might run anyway. His muscles were coiled, ready to bolt. But then his shoulders sagged, and all the fight went out of him at once. As Detective Brooks read him his rights, Brian looked at me one last time. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said quietly. It's been over for a long time. I just finally stopped pretending otherwise. They led him away in handcuffs, past the playground where Tommy had played so many Tuesday afternoons, completely unaware that his own father had been threatening to erase him from existence. I sat back down on the bench and watched the police cars drive away. The undercover officers were packing up their surveillance equipment, returning the park to normal families and children and people who loved each other. Detective Brooks sat down beside me. You okay? I'm fine. And surprisingly, I was. What happens now? Now he goes to trial. With the evidence you provided and his confession just now about trying to solve the problem of killing you, he's looking at serious prison time. And Tommy? Tommy stays with you. The adoption papers Brian filed were never completed anyway. He fled before he could finish the process. Legally, you're still his guardian. I nodded, watching a real mother push her real child on the swings across the playground. Good, Mrs. Miller. For what it's worth, what you did today took real courage. I thought about that as I walked back to my car. Courage, maybe, or maybe it was just what any grandmother would do when someone threatened her grandchild. When I got home, I found Tommy and Mrs. Johnson from next door in the kitchen. She'd been watching him during the afternoon, and Tommy was at the table doing homework while she prepared his snack. Everything go okay? Mrs. Johnson asked quietly, gathering up her purse. Everything's fine now, I said. Thank you for watching him. After she left, Tommy looked up at me from his math problems. How was school? I asked, hanging up my coat. Good. Mrs. Peterson said we get to do reports on our families next week. He looked up at me with those serious brown eyes. Grandma Grace? Is Daddy coming back? I sat down across from him, studying his face. He was 8, but he was smart. He'd figured out more than I'd given him credit for. No, sweetheart. Daddy's not coming back. Tommy nodded like he'd expected that answer. Are you sad? Are you? He considered this carefully. A little, but not really. He was never really here anyway, you know? Out of the mouths of babes. You're right, I said. He wasn't. So it's just us now? It's just us now. Tommy smiled, that gap-toothed grin that never failed to make my heart skip a beat. Good, I like it better this way. 3 months later, I got a letter from the district attorney's office. Brian had been sentenced to 12 years in prison. He'd pled guilty to all charges in exchange for avoiding a trial, probably to spare himself the humiliation of having his crimes laid out in public. The letter also mentioned that he'd waived all parental rights to Tommy. Voluntarily. Apparently, prison had finally convinced him that he really didn't want to be a father. I never told Tommy about the sentence. As far as he was concerned, his father had simply disappeared, which wasn't far from the truth. These days, Tommy and I have our routines. Tuesday afternoons are still for playing at Miller Park, though now I watch him from the bench without worrying about who else might be watching too. Thursday nights are for pizza and old movies. Sunday mornings are for pancakes cut into perfect squares. And every evening after dinner, we play hide and seek in our big old house. Tommy's gotten even better at finding hiding spots, but I always find him eventually, because that's what grandmothers do. We find our grandchildren, we keep them safe, and we love them no matter what. Sometimes, when I'm tucking Tommy into bed, he'll ask me to tell him the story about the pirate treasure we found in Daddy's room. In his version, the grandmother and the little boy are the heroes who save the day by being clever and brave. He's not wrong. The house feels different now, lighter somehow, like a weight has been lifted from its old bones. The stairs still creak when I climb them, but it's a comfortable sound now, familiar and safe. Tommy's growing up strong and kind, nothing like his father. He helps me with the groceries, reads to me from his library books, and still gives the best hugs in the world. In a few years, he'll be too big to fit on my lap, but for now, he's still my little boy who saved his grandmother's life by being good at hiding games. And every morning when I wake up, I'm grateful for 2 things: that Tommy found that loose floorboard, and that we found each other when we needed each other most. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Should I have told Tommy the whole truth about what his father tried to do, or was protecting his innocence the right choice? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more stories like mine.